Hey there, Transformers. Welcome to Work Transformed, the podcast that tackles the ever-evolving world of product development, project chaos, and everything in between. Each episode, we'll dive into the hottest trends, unpack the latest tools, and chat with inspiring guests who are leading the charge. So, buckle up, get ready to transform your work, and let's do this.
It's another week, and it's another episode of Work Transformed. Hello, welcome back. It's me, Thomas Lenore, joined by my forever guest host, Jackie Bidner. And it's a I don't know what it is. It's a case of yes, it is a day. We are recording this, and it is the end of a week. So I think I am a little bit tired. So I'm gonna try to keep this high energy. But I also imagine that's actually a great segment because I also imagine it's midway through the year. Like we're getting toward the close of Q2. And I can imagine people also feel like that in terms of work. It's like a long first half of the year. Energy might be waning. And we're at a great point to stop and reflect and say, like, how are we doing? Like, it's mid-year. How are things going? Because we know, in full transparency, we start the year off with these lofty goals. But as time goes by, the business changes. Things change in our personal and professional life. Things change in terms of, like, what tools and stuff we have access to. We might start the year off with access to this great set of tools that was going to help us run real fast, and it got real expensive, and we no longer have that. And so this is a perfect opportunity for us to just check in and say, how are things going? I think that's what we're going to talk about today. Like, what do you do now that you got to the halfway point to check in and make sure you feel like you're on track? And if not, how do you fix it?
Yeah, I imagine that right now, this time of year, there's probably a lot of mad dashes to get things done and out before the close of Q2, before financials are reported on, before we review even what's left on the roadmap for the rest of the year. Let's do it, Thomas. Let's hop in. How stressed is everyone?
I'm thinking about how stressed I am. It's like halfway through the year, and you're like, am I even doing the stuff I said I was going to do? So I think the first step is dust off those goals and plans that you wrote for yourself. I am not going to sit here and even start to pretend that I believe that everyone's constantly checking in on their goals. They even know what they are. Because I've worked in corporate America, and even, taking a step back from the corporate world, even me personally, in January, a little TMI, I guess, maybe, I'll overshare. I'll use that expression. I'll overshare here. In January, my wife and I sat down and identify what our goals were for 2025. And we said, here's what we want to do from a financial perspective for our family. Here's what we want to do from a personal vacations and entertainment perspective. Like, we created a whole list of goals, and we tried to be reasonable. We didn't want to have too many, but things that were really valuable and important to us. Here we sit at the end of June, and I could not very easily tell you what those goals were. And I think that's the reality for many people. Like, I'm saying that to let you off the hook. For those of you all who are listening who are like, oh man, I need to figure out where I put that Google Doc, or where I put those OKRs, or whatever it is that you're going to reflect on. It's okay that maybe you have to dust them off. It'd obviously be better if you didn't and you were checking in on them frequently, but that's okay. We know that that's not always the reality. So I think the first step is just like, finding out what it is that you said you were going to do this year. What was it that you committed to in January or February for those who are procrastinators?
And I also think it's valuable to ask, do these even still apply? Should we be marching towards these goals? Or if we did achieve some of them, what did we learn? What can we celebrate? Like, did we get something done that we just flew past because there's so much to do and we're so busy? Thanks for sharing that you have that personal experience.
Yeah.
My husband and
I'm thinking about it in real time. I'm like, oh, we should probably dust that off.
My husband and I have like this list of house projects as our goals, and I could not tell you what they are, but I can also tell you that they're wildly not completed. Some little ones are done, but big ones,
big stuff is still sitting there.
Still there, still glaring.
But I think you raised a good point, because you said also check and see if they're really relevant. And sometimes we get into this place where we try to force them to still be relevant, as crazy as that sounds. I remember I worked with a colleague years ago, and we're going through our goals and our OKRs. And I was like, oh, well, I don't really think we should even do that anymore. Like, that doesn't really make sense. And she said, well, we already told people we were going to do this, so we still need to do it. I was like, yeah, we told people we were going to do it. And when we told them that, it was something that needed to be done. But like, we've had policy changes, we have had leadership changes, like so much has changed that like, even if we did this, this would not be at the top of my list anymore. Like this would be somewhere toward the end. And so I don't think we should do it. And she was just fixated on the fact that like we've publicly shared this. I don't want to seem like a failure. I don't want to tell people that like I don't want to do this anymore or make it seem like it was too hard for us to accomplish. And that fear of, just being honest and open with people are like this is not the top priority anymore, crippled her to the point where she still did this stupid goal that we didn't need. And I mean, I'm probably over, dramatizing it because it wasn't like, a very costly goal or anything, but it took a lot of time that we could have spent on something else.
I think what you're bringing up too is this like emotional attachment that a lot of people have when you plan in the beginning of the year. You have a really good like energy. You want to get these things done. You feel very tied to your work and your projects. And that's good.
Mhm.
You want to have that kind of investment in those things. It's the pivot for, oh shoot, this thing may not be as valuable anymore. And like not only do you handle like that changing roadmap where the dots go and what the features are, but like there's this whole human side to it. Like, how do you convince someone who may have mapped it out originally that it's maybe not the best plan? Because you mentioned, you said fear of like already saying that we were going to like have this done. Like what it kind of, oh man, so many things are bubbling up. Kind of ties back to like saying
I love it.
using those powerful questions to say, well, wait, what actually happens if we don't do it? Yes, people know that we said we're going to do it, but what happens if we don't? What happens if we communicate it? What happens if we do something? What happens if we do this other thing instead? What value does it bring? And then that like cascades into being able to craft like a very good communication plan about it and maybe like tell leadership even some scary news about we think we don't want to do this anymore and here's why, and then put it out there. Because like how happy, I mean maybe not happy, but how satisfied are you happy? How satisfied are people when they like it does feel good to get something done. I'm not going to discount that. But if you know that there's something that could be done that would warrant more value, like where is the feelings of the team on it? Like, do they want to pivot? Like,
That
oh
actually is an interesting question because and I think it's a tool that folks can use to help assess their goals once they dust them off. I've often asked this question like, what is the value that this will deliver? And it's a hard question because sometimes it's like monetary value, sometimes there's intrinsic value, there's morale value. Like the value is difficult sometimes to quantify, and honestly, it's also sometimes difficult to compare because I'm like, this brings us $20,000 in new revenue, but this keeps our employees happier. I think we're naturally inclined to say that the revenue is going to be the king, but maybe happier employees will generate even more revenue than that. Like, who
yeah,
knows? So sometimes it's hard to compare. So I often also ask the second question of, and what is the level of complexity, effort, or difficulty in doing this? Because maybe something is slightly less valuable, but super easy. It's like
yeah,
this will take us 2 weeks to do, and yes, it's not gonna give us as much value as the thing, but like it only takes us 2 weeks. The other thing is super hard. There's a lot of unknowns. We still don't have a game plan or the buy-in to do it, and it's likely going to take months and months and months. And yes, it'll give us a lot of value, but that's assuming we get it right, and there's a high likelihood we don't. And like that has
hmm
often helped me have these conversations. And even once the decision's been made, and you talked about delivering that challenging information to leadership and other stakeholders, it helps to even frame the business case for here's why we made this decision, here's how we're doing this.
So step one, dust off your goals and your plans. Really understand where they're at now that mid-year is upon us and identify, are these things still valuable? Thomas, you kind of like led me to think about I don't know why I'm thinking of these in steps, but here we are and it's happening. You mentioned a couple of things, a couple of words that really sparked like a reprioritization exercise to me about value or about complexity, duration, time, effort, and energy. Like, so part of this mid-year exercise is one, are these even still relevant things? And two, are they even still in the proper order? Or
Oh,
three,
absolutely.
three, did something new come up? Like, we're in the world of AI right now. We've got a lot of projects just popping up everywhere that want to utilize this technology to be more effective, efficient, and cost friendly. How do we look at mid-year? Where are the opportunities to do some of those types of projects, innovative work, and all of that? So step 2 really is almost replanning, but it's like a reprioritization process.
And you got it. The key to that is, because you said something that I didn't even think about. A lot of things have popped up since you made the original game plan. The key is to make sure your list is comprehensive, because I've also experienced where people have these sets of goals and then they have this other stuff. It's not a goal per se, Thomas, so I'm not going to put it on this list. It's just something I'm working on, or it's something I committed to this one client or whatever. Everything that you are working on really should be including that comprehensive list, because if you're prioritizing things and you already know there are other detractors or things that are going to take away from your time, you're not being genuine. And what you're doing is you're actually over allocating yourself. If
Yes.
you say, I got this list of 20 things, I'm going to cut it down to 10 things because I know 20 is unreasonable, but in the background there's still 5 other things, then your list is still 5 things too long. So you have to be honest with yourself. And I know sometimes we for the sake of our bosses, don't put it on the list because we don't want them to know. We would like to undercommit and overdeliver. Have you ever heard of that? Undercommit, overdeliver. We want to do that. But at least for yourself, even if this is not an official document, like, be honest with yourself and have a one single list of everything that you're committing to doing or attempting to do for the year. And then, yes, you got to reprioritize that stuff, because what was priority number 1 in January might be priority number 7 now, because we had a merger, and like now the merger is requiring me to actually do some like cleanup of our systems and our data, or something else is now more urgent. It's on fire, whereas this other thing has now unfortunately become a nice to have.
I think that is, I don't want to downplay the challenge of that decision making, because I know you've seen it and I've seen it play out multiple ways and multiple times. It is hard when you're reprioritizing to say we're going to stop doing something. It's hard for people that are doing the work to want to stop doing it. It's hard for leadership to want to stop progress on certain work streams, even though new things pop up. And like, people allocation has a limit. It's finite. Nobody can work 24 hours a day without burning themselves out and falling flat on their face. And
speak for yourself. I work all day, every day. I don't sleep. I don't eat. I'm just working, doing podcasts, sending emails all day.
All right. Well, everybody else in the world except for Thomas and the robots are working 24. Even the robots need maintenance time.
Even the robots are taking time off. Like, I've asked Google, my Google Home things before, where they're like, I don't know, service cannot be connected to her. Like, just like I'm not here. I'm unavailable.
Like, my computer's like, I gotta do an update. Please leave me be. I'm busy. Like, right, our technology is even taking a break. So that being said, I know that I want to talk about this decision making on like what stays or what changes or what is new, because I've seen some things in the past where we'll want to keep it all, and then we go down this road of trying to fill gaps with skill sets that may not exist, which is cool because you're giving new opportunities, but also almost like you're shooting yourself in the foot, because when you're learning a new skill set, you need that time and space to kind of stumble and make mistakes and do things. And I think that there's a real value to being able to do that, but you can't do it under this like complete super pressure situation.
Let's pause here, because now you're talking about something that I think goes beyond just the individual right now. Because I think up until now we've kind of been focused purely on how does it impact me. But now taking my individual contributor hat off and putting on my manager hat, or putting on my, I prefer to call it, people leadership hat.
Your people fedora.
Or take off my people leadership hat and put on my father or head of household hat. I am now making decisions that impact other people. And I have to be cognizant of that, because from a work ethic perspective, everyone does not have the same work ethic. So some of my direct reports may work harder than I do. Some of them we might have the perception that they barely work. Sometimes folks wants and needs are different. So like, I might have folks who I know are trying to grow into different roles, And so I need to take all that into account in this prioritization as well. Do I have enough diversity of projects, within reason, to give people the opportunity to continue to learn new skill sets and do things, or am I asking people to do very monotonous, mundane work? And you may say, well, Thomas, right now I don't have the flexibility or the opportunity to create a lot of, fun custom projects. Like, this is just the work that needs to be done. But then you need to keep that in mind as you're talking about capacity, because me being able to do a very monotonous, rote activity over and over again for a long period of time, after a certain amount of time, I'm either going to get burned out or start making a lot of mistakes because it's just so boring and so, and so, like, I might have to, even though technically I could accomplish way more, I may have to ratchet down how much I think I can get through between July and December, because I know that the kinds of activities are not things that people are going to be excited for. They're going to end up taking more sick time or personal days or things like that because they just need a mental break.
That's true. Something that popped up for me, and I wrote it down, so maybe I'll say this later in the recap, is when you make decisions on allocation, then keep in mind that there are very complex considerations that you want to make, especially if you're like leading the business forward. And especially when you go think about that people management, like what is going to keep people motivated? And maybe some of these like mundane and repeatable processes aren't, because maybe it's not normally in your wheelhouse. And that's where I think a lot of times, like, contractors come in, like, hey, we've got this thing, it just needs to get done. We've got these other larger projects where we need our current employees' subject matter expertise in. Like, these are all things that are potential for this allocation kind of conversation. I just think it's a disservice to say, oh, we'll just hire contractors for this, without thinking about what that work is. Is it something that someone no business context can come in quickly? Or is it something that's going to be a little more complex and, XYZ person on my team expressed interest in this kind of challenge, right? And how do you have those conversations with some of the other, department heads that are involved in this reprioritization? Because I think that's another challenge, is everyone's kind of got their own lens on what they want. Because, like, I'll tell you what, if you go into a mid-year reprioritization conversation and you have pushed off tech debt from the beginning of the year, you're going to have some very unhappy engineers if you tell them you have to check down their tech debt backlog again and not focus on it, because we don't want to build that up to a place where it's unmanageable. But product wants to make sure that what we're delivering to the market is super valuable to keep us relevant, to keep us innovative, to keep us like cool, shiny toy like that we're putting out there. Man, how do you balance all of those perspectives?
So I would actually say, go ahead. I didn't mean to hop in on top of you, but I
was going to just like pat us all back a little bit, because it is one of those skills that we flex all the time, is thinking about how these like different areas are impacted and what they care about. And it seemingly goes unnoticed because we do it from such a neutral place, and like, go program folks, go agilists, go project managers.
Well, I'll talk about, like, very candidly, what I think is important is starting, I often use this idea of like concentric circles and like starting small and getting larger and larger. But I think it starts at home first, so to speak. When I was a leader of people, I would do this kind of self-evaluation almost, in terms of like, given our roadmap, given our goals, given the OKRs we committed to, given the insert, goal setting framework of your choice, here's where I think we are. And I would do a percent just for like my own internal brain, because to say complete versus incomplete is hard, to say on track versus off track is hard. It's like, how far off track are we? Like, are we just like a week behind? So we're not on track, but we're not that far off, or are we like significantly far? So I did like a little grade. I'm like, 50%, 75%, 25%. And it was not an academic thing. It was just purely for understanding. And then I kind of went through like, here are the things I think we can still accomplish. Here are the things we can accomplish, but we need to pare down the scope. Here are the things we just definitely cannot even accomplish. Like, we won't sign up for it. We will do it if we get extra time, but we will not sign up for it. And I kind of did the whole reprioritization thing by myself. And I think this is where a lot of managers specifically get in trouble. Then they go and immediately communicate this out to the company. Here's what we're going to do Q3 and Q4. But I, to pat my own self on the back, took this back to my team. And I said, hey, team, here's what I think. I think for this Jira migration project, based on how slow we've been getting through each of the projects and how many defects we're finding, I don't think we're going to be able to hit this by September 30th. I think the best we can probably do is end of year. For this other project, I think because no one's really engaging with us, we're going to just punt that until next year. This one seems on track, etc. I just went through all the things. And this is the powerful part. I said, where did I get it right and where did I get it wrong? And I was floored because the Jira migration project, for example, they were like, no, I mean, it was taking us a long time because we intentionally started with the hardest projects and we didn't tell you that. But like the rest of them, the last two we did were like 3 days long. And so we're getting through it quickly. So they were like, no, we are on track, even though numerically we're not. And like, do not change the date. Like, we are bought in, we will commit to doing this. They're like, yes, you're right on this thing. We're not going to be able to hit that. Let's take it out. But they were all bought in. So when I walked away, having revised the plan with their feedback, when I went and presented to leaders and other folks, there was not any pushback from my team. My team didn't come back to me frustrated. Why did you sign us up for this? They didn't come back saying like, we could never accomplish this, because we were all bought in. And on those 1 or 2 items where there was a disconnect, where they were saying, no, Thomas, we can't accomplish this. And I was saying, oh, we definitely can. Like, we talked about it. And so like, there was context for like, oh, you thought I was asking us to do X, Y, and Z, but in reality, I only wanted A, B, and C. So that with this pared down scope, do you now think it's possible? Yes. Okay. So now I'm glad we had this conversation. And so I think that's an important loop that you have to make with your team.
I love so many things about this. So I think this also is like part of a step 3, if you will. Communicate, collaborate. Like the thing that I love that you did, and the thing that I think is very effective and I like to do, is you did some homework on your own and created a visual for your people to react to, and gave them insight up front on, we're reprioritizing. Here's what I think. This decisions have not been made yet, team. Like, look at this visual. It is so beneficial to have that visual because, like, to your point, then the lights went on and the energy came out and the no, Thomas, we want to do the Jira migration project. Let me tell you why, like, and how far it is. And like, instead of doing the opposite and coming to your team with like, what do you think we can work on? Like, you're just going to have a stairs. Like, I don't know the work we're working on. What do you mean? And so it goes that step further. Like, the thing I noticed is that you, by doing this early on, and involving your team and giving them something to react to, you just instilled a boatload of confidence for the back half of the year for them, from what they feel good about and not good about and things. So
100%. And the thing is, I saw it in the work product because what they were producing they were excited and energized to do it because they kind of committed themselves to it. But even in that meeting, like, it was an immediate thing where it was like, people were arguing, like, no, don't deprioritize that. We want to do this. No, we absolutely can. Like, they were super excited and they felt bought in. And we talked about this because we do a quarterly retro as a team, and an annual retro. And this came up in one of our retros, and they were like, hey, we appreciate you for having this conversation, because they had talked to some of their peers in other departments. And they're like, they didn't have this kind of conversation. Their boss came back to them and was like, hey, as of next month, we're going to start working on this thing. We're going to kill this other thing. We're not going to do this anymore. And there was minimal contact. It just felt very frustrating. Like you're saying, the work I have been doing for the last X amount of months is not important, which I'm sure is not what their manager meant, but that's how it felt. It was conveyed to them as what you worked on was not important. You didn't do enough of it. It's taking too long, so we're just not going to do it. And you never want your team to feel like that.
I don't think that manager has bad intentions. They're task-oriented and want to shuffle things around to get the right things done. But I think that just goes to show why our roles, like our human element roles, are so important, because it's not about just setting the task list. It's about, again, more change management. We just throw change management in, sprinkle it in here and there. How do you move that elephant? Have to make sure that the elephant stays motivated. The elephants follow your people, and the people need to want to be able to do it. And they don't want to feel bad about, oh, we're not going to do the project I spent Q1 and Q2 on, because that does feel bad. Like when you work on something, you're passionate about it, But the way you counterbalance that is like go off like why that's not wasted work if you can, because it probably isn't wasted work and you probably learned a lot from it, which makes it not wasted work. And then two, like if we're pivoting to something different that's more valuable, just share why. Again, step 3 is going to just be all communicate, communicate, communicate. Share what you
Well,
think.
you're making communication sound so easy, Jackie. What do I do when I have to go and tell that SVP or tell that high-ranking leader that this project that they asked me for, either I'm deprioritizing it or it's significantly behind?
That is an excellent question. And you're right. There are so many times when communication feels hard and then, people just avoid doing it. But step one, be brave, stick with the facts,
I
and
love it.
share it.
I love that one.
Share it in a very simple way to make things understandable. So like, let's say you have a sales leader, for example, that has been waiting on a feature for one of their clients for months and months and months. And this other thing, like maybe the development of that feature is going poorly because we keep finding defects in legacy code that we need to use or whatever it is. If we haven't been looping in that sales leader on our findings during the project, during Q1 and Q2, like we're already kind of setting ourselves up for failure to communicate that reprioritization. If they're just finding out now how extended it will be or how it's going to be deprioritized because we learned that only one small client needs it and our 100 clients now need this other thing by the end of Q3 to roll into the holiday season. I don't know what the business is. I just made that up. So it is hard to share messages.
But I think you said something that's really important.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, maybe we're playing a little catch up now that we're communicating it, but we really shouldn't use these quarterly anchors as like, here's when we give you the update. Like, we should be communicating things early and often. Whatever hiccup that has us behind schedule I'm positive, did not show up this morning. And we're like, oh man, we were all on track every day until today, and now we're 50% behind. Like that's not how this works. Like this has been gradually building up. And as you saw it starting to build, you should have started threading the needle. And that way this is not a surprise to them. But you just have to be brave and step up and kind of communicate the not only the news of the news about the news. Why did it happen? How did it happen? What kind of preventive measures have either already been put in place and how those are working, or what are you going to do in the future to guard this so that this doesn't get further off the rails? Like all of the things I think makes leaders feel better. The other thing that people don't often do that I think would make leaders feel a lot better is communicating that things aren't all or nothing. Very often we're like, the project is behind schedule, which makes it seem like everything is behind schedule. It's horrible news. And we never say, overall, we're behind. We have already released 2 of the 5 features, though. Those are in market, and we're already getting revenue for that, or we're already selling those customers, are already doing this. These ones will be late, and this one may or may not make it in this year. That's the one that's the most at risk. But we are very confident in these other 2 pieces. And like that's showing, though everything's not going to be maybe available on time, here's what's already gotten out to the market and feedback. Here are things that are close and just a little bit behind. And then it doesn't feel quite as bad. At least to me, it's like, okay, well, there's some silver lining here versus the normal communication of, oh, the project overall is behind. And like, that doesn't sit well.
I think that's a really nice strategy. You can take, what has been completed and highlight and showcase that to kind of soften the blow of the missing pieces. And we did talk a lot just now about being a proactive communicator, talking about these things as they bubble up, and whether that is some kind of check-in with your stakeholders or a forum or whatever. That's all good and dandy. But what if we didn't do that? What if we haven't done that? How do we course correct now and have those challenging conversations? And I think one of the things for that conversation is one, a visual. Again, anything that can be made into a simple visual, put it on there. 2, put on what the risks were and what we saw. And 3, own it. Own that you didn't communicate it. If you try to like skirt around it or try to make excuses for missing it, like that's just gonna snowball into a non-trusting kind of conversation. If you own it and say, we saw this back in May, we thought we could handle it, we were wrong, we're going to change the way we communicate our challenges because of this scenario. Here's what we learned is that sometimes when we think we can, course correct, we still need to communicate that to you because there are these now what you've seen is this event where we fell way off course and now you're getting this news late. And I know that feels frustrating, right? Like that's part of leading with the empathy.
Ooh, you're naming the emotion. We haven't talked about that, but that's one of my favorite techniques.
Yeah, name the emotion. Name it. I know you're frustrated. Like, ooh.
Don't dance around it because they're frustrated. Like they already are feeling it. So if you just decide, oh, I won't acknowledge it, maybe they won't experience the frustration. That's not true. That's not true. I think in naming the emotion, I had a different comment by the way, but this is, fresh and live. By naming the emotion, I think it also helps from a human perspective for a person to know that you don't think this is acceptable. When you say, I know this is frustrating news, and I don't even like the fact that I have to share this with you. Like I do feel frustrated that we even got to this point. It helps them to say, okay, Thomas is taking this seriously. Because sometimes we just deliver news, and by not naming the emotion, by dancing around it, it's like they came in this meeting, they said all these things, they didn't even realize that this is a big deal. They're just going about the flow, and it's like, no, I did realize, and I want you to know, I realized that this is a huge deal, and here's how we're gonna fix it, or here's why it can't be fixed, but what we're gonna do anyway.
Right? You got to give that space, but then there's that like delicate balance of now how do we move forward? Because you don't want to ruminate on that emotion. You don't want it to overtake that entire feeling of the day, of the week, of whatever. But yes, I think that
I do
that's
want to
true.
make a shameless plug too.
Do it, plug it.
Um, we talk about a lot of things here, and I think even Jackie, you and I'm just gonna say this and see how it lands for you. I think we take for granted that we are the project management, program management, change management arm of a lot of companies, and so we say things like talk about the risks and that you identified and how you mitigated that. We say things like create an artifact or a visual, and for every person who may be listening, that may not be a natural skills that they have or a function of their role. Like I'm thinking of finance, for example. In finance, there's not typically a project manager unless you're doing a huge rollout of like an ERP or some kind of system. In a lot of cases, there aren't project managers, they're not change managers, there's not program managers. And so you probably didn't create a document early on and identify risks. You probably didn't do some of these things that a project manager would have done. And my shameless plug is not to tell you to do them. I mean, I think you should do them. I think you should. But I know that's adding yet another thing to your plate. I am saying that I think folks should also think about how non-traditional roles like project management and other things for certain fields and industries may be advantageous, even if it's a third-party contractor, even if it's only part-time, even if it's only for certain projects that are high visibility. Like, I think sometimes we get so hung up in project managers are for technology things that we don't realize that everything is a project. So this is just my shameless plug. Like there are people like me and Jackie and others out in the world who can help support organizations, even if it's just short term to say like, hey, I know you all aren't used to doing these kind of practices. I can come in for 6 months, work with you hand in hand to show you how to do. Like I will do them first to show you that they are done and effective, and then I will coach you for a few months on how you can do it, and then I will leave, and you don't have that overhead expense indefinitely. But I think there's value in that. Sorry, that has nothing to do with quarterly planning, but maybe it does. But maybe you're at the point where you're like, I need to bring that person in, and so like I need to factor that into my the budget for the rest of the year. But like this is the time where you can make that decision. Maybe,
but that's a great point because a lot of the stuff we talk about comes from this lens of this backbone supporting function of program, project, change management, transformation management, and all of that. And it isn't just beholden to the software development lifecycle or product development lifecycle. I mean, I was on finance product. You said finance, and I was like, oh, I love finance, but I'm still scared of it. And that's what I did as part of some previous roles is try to put some good practices in place for projects that were not related to our product roadmaps at all. And even like having the honor of like doing a session with like other groups, like our HR team, just talking about like techniques and here's some simple ways to put a cadence in place so you can check in. Like, how do you make sure that you're checking in? And if you are doing projects that aren't related to technology and would benefit from some of this, bring somebody in, help them out, bring us in.
And just one last thing on this point, because I think for those folks who do identify the need, I think their very next thing is gonna be like, there's no way, we've never had a project manager. We don't have it in the budget. There's no way we're gonna get approved. It's like, it's just, I would love to, but it's not possible. We talk all the time about like stretch opportunities and like folks being interested. You don't know who on your team already maybe was a project manager in a different life and like has switched into a new career, but already has those skills and can, at least for a short period of time, like do some of this stuff. You don't know who from your project management office over on the product and technology side of your business, if you have such a thing, has extra bandwidth. And like, I can't, take on everything, but like if there's a single project that you all are working on or a single work stream that really could value, I can lean in there. Like I have, being a leader of PMOs, have like given my people out for like projects before, and they've loved it because they've learned a whole new thing. They're like, I've never worked with the marketing team before. I don't know anything about marketing, but that was such a fun project. We redesigned the website. Like that was so cool. And I got to see the like apples of my labor come quickly and whatever. So, maybe I threw out there a contractor, but maybe if for your job, it's not a contractor, it's asking who can support in this way. But like, I guess my ultimate ask is don't disregard it. Don't say, yeah, that would be a great thing to have. We can't do it, move on. At least try. You never know what you're
Yeah.
going to get in the try.
When you're really tying it back to the very complex considerations that need to be made in terms of skill set when you are making decisions on allocation to which things are we going to work on. Ah, so good. All right, so what if, hear me out, big challenge. What if we go through our activities with our teams, showing off the work, think, doing that first pass of here's what we can do, I think, team, then coming back with feedback saying, no, these are the things I think we could do. Let's pretend in a perfect world, all the different department heads have done that with their teams, and now you have this aligned, newly reprioritized list, and you get it in front of leadership, and they say, no, we need all these other things. How do you handle that communication?
This has actually happened to me multiple times in my career in multiple different businesses and industries.
Oh, I can't.
Because at the end of the day, and I think this is sometimes a disconnect between executives, middle level managers, and then like what I'll call frontline workers, probably not the best term, but like folks who are in individual contributor level roles. I think the perception is folks at the top are so disconnected from the business and they just want things and they don't care that we can't deliver them. We've said that. And I think what the challenge is, having sat in those conversations before, is sometimes we do know. Sometimes we do know what is realistic and possible. We do know what we're asking for is challenging. But the other reality we're faced with is we also know the revenue targets that we have to make so that we don't do layoffs. We also know the productivity targets we have to hit so that we are able to hire those people or like have the budget for these morale events. Like there's this reality of like what is easy and like and achievable without much vigor, and then it's reality of like this is what is the minimum level we need to keep the business going. And I would say they very rarely even out, because even if you think about like in the startup world, you
Yeah.
burn through a lot of like venture capital cash in the beginning. Like you're not making money. You're burning through cash that people gave you with the aspiration that one day you'll make money. So even then, it's not like, even though it feels like from an employee's perspective where everything is great, it feels like, oh, the expectations are even there. The leaders are like, we aren't doing enough. Like we don't have enough revenue. We don't have enough this. And so I think the challenge becomes when the leadership tells you your plan doesn't work, instead of asking them or letting them dictate to you, here's the parts of the plan that you're going to actually deliver. Like you're still going to deliver that on September 30th. I think you go into the powerful questions. If we were to deliver this, what challenges do you expect the business to face? Like where is there going to be a shortfall? What are the expectations that we're missing? Because having been a leader, I know my knee-jerk reaction is to tell you what I think the solution is, not tell you where the problem is with what you've presented. And so I think by instead of letting them dictate to you what they think the best solution is, which may actually not even be the best solution, you ask them, why is this not an acceptable plan? What will make it better? Where are areas that you have significant concerns, or what's the biggest risk that you're seeing with this? And then once you listen and internalize what they said, you may say, well, then we can meet in the middle. We're not going to do what you suggested either, but we're going to stop this project because based on what you're saying, if customer retention is super important, like we don't need to build this new tool to target a different sector of the market because we're just focused on the sector that we already have. So we're going to kill this tool, but that'll free up bandwidth to do this other thing. And so like you can, I don't know where the expression horse trade comes from. Like I don't know the origin, so I hope it's not offensive. But you can better horse trade because you really understand the underlying drivers versus just reacting to, oh man, they still want us to do this project, and we told them it's going to take too long because they don't really understand the complexities. I don't think.
So I don't know where that term comes from either. But there was so many nuggets that you had talked about, and there's a couple of them that I kind of want to tee up. I don't want to dive in today because I think it's a whole other podcast topic. But like there was a couple of things that you had talked about, and that was, if you get to that leadership level and you have this plan and they say that's not going to work, and you dive into, well, what do you mean? What are we missing? Really what you're asking or what you're trying to get to the bottom of is what is the measure of success of these things? Sometimes it is a revenue target, and the purpose of that revenue target is to keep people employed. Sometimes it is an operational efficiency. Sometimes it is, whatever you may have you, but a lot of times it's like a missing piece of the puzzle or a missing piece of information that you could then communicate back with the teams like, hey, our plan doesn't work because now we're still missing this revenue gap. How creative can we get to solve that? Like, and really giving the people that you've hired that autonomy to help close that gap. So making sure those expectations that may have been missing are now like uncovered so that you can utilize it in that continuous evolution of this plan that you're doing. I also was thinking about, what was I thinking about? I was also thinking about like what comes next, right? What comes next in terms of after this communicate, this step 4 of now we need to monitor this progress for the next year. And how do we change?
And seriously monitor it, like not write on a piece of paper again and then forget you wrote that down.
Yes. And like, and it's almost like a reflection of what did we not do well in Q1 and Q2 that we need to do better in terms of like, maybe it's that communicating risks earlier than we did. Maybe we have a few lessons learned. What are those lessons learned? And I know that the reprioritization exercise is, it takes a lot of energy to get it done. And so it's not as desirable to sit down and reflect on some of these like softer skills. But like, if you can take 2 hours and say, we had these scenarios pop up in these couple quarters. Here's the continuous improvement activities we're going to do to make sure that we don't have these pitfalls again. Here's what we learned. And you can even learn great things. Oh, here's some things that we communicated super early and super often. And our relationship with all of our stakeholders is amazing, right? There's learnings on the positive side as well. And I think the last thing is, it's like step 4.1 or maybe step 5 even, is how do we get back, and this is the tee up that I want to do for a future podcast, is how do we go back to our success criteria or our measures and our metrics and look at them in a way that helps us define if we were successful or not, or helps us uncover where we need to dive in to make improvements, right? Metrics in and of themselves are not bad. Usually they tell a story, and we have to figure out what that story is so we can continue to drive, that success for the company and the teams and the organization and everybody. Mr. Thomas, are you there?
I am exhausted now with this proposition. I imagine some people are like, I'm exhausted too. And I want to say this is not quick, simple, or easy unless you only have like 1 or 2 goals and they're all on track. That it is super simple and super easy. But for the most part, it's not simple and easy, and that's why I would advocate for this idea of continuous check-ins. Like, I got to the point with my team where we checked in. We had a team meeting every 2 weeks. That was just a regular team meeting. We talked about whatever was top of mind, but I always reserve 5 to 10 minutes in that meeting just to go through at a high level where we are with each of the goals that we have for as a department. And then if there was help or intervention necessary, because sometimes people be like, hey, this would be going well, but like lately I've just been slammed. Like if anyone could just step in for me for a week or two, like that would help. And
Yeah.
just like in the stand up, they would say, okay, I can do this or I can do that. Um, but that made it so much easier when I got to the end of the quarter because then I was like, I already know where all these things are. We already talked about like what interventions are needed. We already talked about the ones that are off track, and I've already communicated that up the chain as well. So it's not
Yeah.
going to be a surprise to anyone. So like, it was so much simpler. And so if you're sitting there like Thomas, Jackie, this is so hard, so much work. I concur. And I do feel bad, but like this is step one. And then you can do better in the future and it won't be this hard. But
I
this is where
agree.
we're starting from.
It is hard. So remember to be brave, especially when we get to that communication step. I also thought about something with measurement that I think you said. I want to ask you a question. You had said one of your strategies is to remember things aren't all or nothing. And I feel like that ties into
Yes.
measurement of like success criteria. Um, would you verify if that is true, or am I off base?
I cannot
Oh no, I've
verify
lost you.
because my internet froze for a second and you sounded like a robot and I didn't understand anything you said. So I don't know if that's true.
Excellent. I am a robot now. No, so you had said way back when we were talking about delivering hard news about things not being done, this concept of remembering that it's not all or nothing. And for me,
Yes.
remembering that it's not all for nothing or nothing guides me back to what is that success criteria or my success measures, and being able to show off like, oh, here's how we're measuring success. We did hit 2 of these things. And so I know that I'm shamelessly plugging measures and metrics. But I did notice that in our conversation today. I wanted to
Yeah,
call.
that's important, and it's really two things for me. It's like what are the success criteria, and how do we make sure they are measurable and specific? Those are my favorite of the SMART acronym. Specific, it needs to be very specific. Like what specifically are we measuring, and how do we measure that thing? But that's only one piece of it. To me, it's also about how do we break it down to be um building blocks versus how do we think about it as components that all have to come together before the thing can be, valuable. And I said that
Oh,
because I
that's
often ask my team, how do like, okay, our goal is to, I'm trying to think of what one of the goals was in the past. Oh, we had a goal that was to improve the release notes process. Like people were getting these release notes that were somewhat technical, so they were somewhat not technical, and so like it was not really helping any audience. Like marketing couldn't use it, sales couldn't use it, technology couldn't use it. Like the release notes were just random, and we were like, oh, we're gonna improve the release notes. And I think the team's idea was like, we're gonna draft this new process, and we're gonna come out with these new documents. We're gonna do all these things. I was like, what's the smallest thing of value we can deliver? What's the smallest thing of value we can deliver? And the thing of value is not solving the problem; it's just a step toward the solution. And they're like, oh, well, we can go out and we can draft 3 or 4 different verses. I was like, that's the smallest thing we can do. They're like, well, the smallest thing we could do is just like ask people what they want to see in the release notes and put that in the document. I was like, excellent. We're gonna do that. That's the first part of the goal. Because the document then became if we just gave you the answer to these 7 questions that all of you all seem to want the answer to, like would that work? So now we know what the requirements are. And like we're not just drafting random things. And I was like, what's the next smallest thing? They're like, we can pull from Jira and put this together into like a automated project. And I said, nope, that's not the next smallest thing. They're like, we can just make a mock one in like Google Slides, maybe. I was like, yep, that's like, how do we think of the small wins? And in this case, unfortunately, like, none of those things were productionizable. So like they weren't actually a solution in and of themselves. But for other projects, we did create like a prototype that wasn't working. So even if we didn't finish the rest of it, this small thing did work. Just,
it's
just
almost. I was
go
gonna say
ahead.
it's almost as if you're encouraging people to work iteratively and in smaller
Absolutely.
iterations.
Mm-hmm.
We have a podcast on
these
it.
these product development techniques are so important and so applicable to things outside of just product development.
Yeah, totally agree.
But I don't get enough credit. All right, I think we're at time. What else did we not talk about?
Oh, we've not talked about a lot of things. We have not talked about our weekend plans. But I don't know that that goes in with this conversation.
Well, with that being said, I guess the last thing I'll leave folks with is don't get discouraged and don't tie your work to these goals. I've seen it before where people tie their work at the company to these goals. Like, I am not doing a good job at my job because I didn't. And you have to realize that there are so many other things and other environmental factors that can cause you to be behind on goals, to not be able to meet them, etc. So just know that there are times where there are things that you personally probably could have done better, but then there are also a lot of times where you're working hard, you're doing everything you can do. Times are just tough. And I think given this economy, given the political setting, given the many companies that have done layoffs and role consolidations, given all the things that are going on in the world, I want you to give yourself some grace. And
Aw,
with that,
Colin.
I think we're ready for the wrap up.
Yeah, very heartfelt words of encouragement. Let's do our wrap up. So this podcast was about mid-year planning and checking in and how do we know we're on the right path. So we first, step one, and these steps they overlap each other and can be used in most any order. But step one is to dust off your goals and your plans. Are your goals even relevant anymore? Do you know if we need to pivot? Do the OKRs still make sense? And address those things with bravery and with, I guess, some vigor. Make sure that the value that you're trying to identify is there. And sometimes it leads you into realizing that maybe some of the most complex things aren't worth doing at the moment. Maybe some of these smaller wins are going to drive the most progress forward. Our second step is reprioritize. This is a big one. Make sure you have a clear understanding of all of the work that is in plate and on your plate and in your backlog, because this is going to help you be easy for me to say. This is what's going to help you get the best out of your reprioritization exercise. So what stays and what has changed and possibly what is new? When you're going through this reprioritization, you're going to make decisions on allocation and you can't do all the things all the time. So know that there are some very complex considerations to be made. Things like considering stretch goals or stretch opportunities for folks, or things that like start at home. Let's evaluate what our team is actually capable of and pull them into that collaborative conversation. This brings us to step 3, communicate, 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 and collaborate, collaborate, collaborate. Creating something for your teams to react to in terms of, hey, I took a stab at thinking this is what the priorities look like for the second half of the year, team. I want to give you some time to voice this over. It's super beneficial. It instills confidence in your team and ignites that commitment again, really ignites that activation that we want from our teams to keep moving things forward. The fourth step is let's make sure we're looking back. Let's retro, let's monitor and give even more communication. What didn't go so well in Q1 and Q2 that we want to change for Q3 and Q4? Maybe it's communication wise. Maybe it's a process change. Or maybe we're just highlighting something that went so well, we want to make sure we keep doing it. And step 5, measure, 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 teeing up, making sure you're measuring those results, measuring those success criteria, and measuring the impact this work is having on the organization. This is a great way to fill gaps if we don't know why we're doing the work we're doing. Well, what are we going after? What are those measures? And you can pull some of that from your senior leadership team if you don't feel like you know it or your team know it. We've talked about so many more other things, but I think that is like the 5-ish step-ish process for thinking through how to get to this replanned back half of the year. Thomas, do you have anything else you'd like to add?
Know that you are important and the work that you do matters.
Oh,
It not matters to no one else, it matters to you. Other than that, stay cool. It's hot out there, and we'll talk to you next week.
bye.
All right, y'all. Bye-bye.